Hi, I'm Savannah Jones with DMG's Bootstraps and Business. Thanks for checking us out today. I'll be talking with John Ferraro. He is the Senior Director of Business Development at the Trade Desk. We'll talk about the digital and tech worlds. We know that they're rapidly changing. If you're a business professional in the industry and you're looking at making a career advancement, we'll talk about tips and advice on how to navigate that. Also, if you're a business owner, business professional, and you're reevaluating your advertising and marketing plan, or perhaps you're looking at getting involved with a new advertising or marketing plan and dipping your toe into the pool of the digital and tech world. Well, he'll have a lot of answers, and I appreciate your time today, John. Thank you. So, John, let's find out a little bit about where you're from and what your dreams and aspirations were when you were heading into college and what that actually turned out to be.
Absolutely. I grew up in Rochester, New York, so go Bills, go Yankees. It was a great place to be from. So I grew up there in the 70s and 80s. And I always thought in high school that I was going to be a lawyer. So I ended up going to college at American University in Washington, D.C. This would have been 1987 when I entered there. And I picked a major that I thought was absolutely perfect for going to law school afterwards. And it was a BA in interdisciplinary studies. So what the heck does that mean, you ask? It was equal parts communications, law, economics, and government. So I realized after about 2 years that the only classes that I had an interest in and I enjoyed were the communications classes. So it was too late to change majors at that point. So followed through and finished school and realized that I only had about 10 total classes that focused in on communications. The job market stunk in 1991, so I ended up deciding to go to grad school and got a master's in mass communication with an emphasis in PR. After that, I did use the master's degree, so to speak, for a couple of years. I did corporate communications and public relations for a company in the home security space and then a company in the healthcare industry. And it was when I was at the company in the healthcare space that I came to realize that, I'm working in the marketing department and I'm making my salary. And there's all these people that are nearby in the sales department that were making the same salary, but they also got this additional money called commissions. And it just kind of light bulb moment. I said, that could be something worth exploring. However, my first exposure to sales was the summer in between my junior and senior year of college. I ended up taking a job selling encyclopedias door to door in low income neighborhoods in Norfolk, Virginia.
Wow.
I kid you not. And I lasted a whole week doing that before I just didn't show up and decided to deliver pizzas that summer. So going into sales was probably the farthest thing in my mind that I would ever do. And here we are 25 years later, sales and sales management.
And your path has been varied because, like you said, you were thinking about being a lawyer, communications, PR, and then you stepped into broadcasting, which just kind of opened up the doors for you to a whole new world.
Yeah. My wife was, at the time, was working for a media research company and was selling her product into radio and television stations. And she said, I really think you might like media sales. So as I was thinking about, changing kind of career paths from a, marketing PR to a selling capacity, I started just sending out, blind resumes like a lot of people do. And I was sending out resumes that were for sales jobs. And I also was sending out resumes for like higher level PR jobs. So keeping that door open a little bit if a great opportunity came my way. And I remember getting called for an interview at a radio station and interviewing with the general sales manager who it became known to me about halfway through the interview. Up until this point, I'm thinking I'm interviewed for a sales role, but one of the questions, I realized that it was for a promotions director role at the radio station. And then he just looked down at me. He's like, I just think you're overqualified. He said, this job only pays gosh, I think it was like $23,000 at the time. He said, I just don't know if that's going to work for you. I said, yeah, that's a pretty big pay cut. But I'll tell you what, I actually am thinking about going into sales. So do you have any sales jobs? And he said, you know what? I don't, but my counterpart, Shirley, who was one floor above, does have a role on her team. And he literally called her up while I was in his office and said, you should meet with this guy. I just interviewed him, and he wants to get into sales. So had that conversation, and that was the entry point. Slinging radio advertising in the mid 90s.
Took the elevator up one floor, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. Exactly.
And then you went from radio to TV.
I did. So after spending close to 3 years selling radio, I moved to sell television for the NBC affiliate in Seattle, and ended up working at that company for about 9 years. And that's where I got my first job in sales management in 2004. And it was also the place where I sort of transitioned from traditional media to digital media. I got an opportunity in 2007 to run sales for all the owned and operated websites for the Seattle NBC affiliate, and I definitely jumped on it. Although at that point, digital media was really just emerging, and it was a complete afterthought, if it was an any thought, for a lot of marketers. So it wasn't kind of what it looks like today, obviously, but I felt it was the future. I felt that this is where the world is going to kind of evolve and move to. So gave up selling Friends and Seinfeld and ER, which was arguably pretty easy, to trying to educate people as to the benefits of, display and video advertising online and on mobile phones.
And to your point, it has changed quite a bit. Why don't you kind of walk us through where you were was that around 2007 that you jumped
2007, yep.
So why don't you kind of
the digital side
walk us through kind of what that has looked like and where you are today? Because like you said, it was at the beginning, and now it's like the wild, wild west. It's changing so fast, and we'll talk about tips for people who want to get into the industry, and then we'll talk about tips for business owners, business professionals who are looking at their advertising and marketing plans and trying to figure it out. And maybe you can just tell them like a first step. But first, let's talk about you from 2007 to where you are now.
Yeah. So I did end up enjoying the digital media side of things. So a couple of years later, I got the opportunity to run sales for a pure play digital publisher. That publisher was called whitepages.com. And yes, it's what it sounds like. It's practical contact information. It had no affiliation to the phone book. Ended up, securing that URL, and the site it was over 50 million unique users went to the site to find addresses and phone numbers. And we, like most websites, monetized the free content we provided through advertising. So it was actually pretty funny. So the founder decided on this concept when he was just out of school, and he's working at, I think, Morgan Stanley. He was in the finance world, and he started kind of doing this little side project, and he's working 80 hours in the finance world, and he starts this little website. And after about a year, he's making more money from the website, just monetizing advertising, than the Morgan Stanley job. And he secured the name White Pages, and he literally had like $800 in his bank account. And he tracked down the guy that owned the URL. He lived in San Diego, and the guy wanted more than that, but he somehow talked him into selling him the domain for $800. Fast forward about 6 years later, the domain White Page without the s.com was getting a lot of traffic. People just inadvertently going there but not putting the s. And so our founder went to try to get that URL secured. You want to guess, Savannah, how much he paid for whitepage.com after paying $800 for whitepages.com 6 years earlier?
I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but $1.2 million.
$1 million.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. I mean, it's outrageous, but I'm not surprised. Some wise guy or woman bought it and just sat on it.
Yeah. So I led a team that focused in on selling into the west half of the U.S. So I had folks in kind of most of the major markets, L.A., San Francisco, and Dallas, and we were based in Seattle. And I really at that point just really fell in love with like the sales management and leadership side of things. And I think a couple lessons I learned along the way when I was first entering, my very first job in terms of managing people. I just thought about all my previous managers and really tried to emulate the good traits from who I thought were great. And ironically, like I think some of the lessons were as important from like the bad managers I've had too, of what not to do in certain situations. And just really interesting. And I think one thing that has always fascinated me about sales leadership and sales management is that you can take two people that are on polar opposite sides of the spectrum from like a personality perspective, from just how they approach business, and they can both be super successful in sales. And I've just found that to be true and fascinating over the years. And the other thing for anybody listening that's managing people, found it super important not to manage people into like the style that made you successful as a seller or whatever industry you're in. Because if you do that, if you manage people into that box, you're going to have 20% of your people successful, and those people are going to be the people that kind of look and feel just like you, and then 80% of the people will flounder, right? They'll just not do well. So I think one thing is always thinking about people like in managing at an individual level and identifying strengths and areas for improvement, and really trying to coach up people's weaknesses and make sure that they know what their strengths are so they can continue to leverage those and accentuate them. So total tangent to what you just asked me about.
Oh, I love it though, because you're right.
Media.
Play up to individuals. I mean, that's why you hired them, I'm assuming, is because you liked what they brought to the table. So highlight it.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, after the publisher experience, I then ended up working at three what we call DSPs in the industry, which is an acronym for demand side platform. And first one was Rocket Fuel. That company was acquired by a company called Seismic in the end of 2017. I worked for a smaller DSP called Beeswax. They recently, a few months ago, just got acquired by Freewheel, which is a company that Comcast owns. And now I'm at the trade desk.
And so what's the trade desk?
That's my daughter, who's 17, asked me, like, what is it you really do? She on occasion, she asked me this, and I tell everybody like what I do is I send emails, right? That's what I do for a living, send and receive emails. But in all seriousness, I was trying to explain it to her, and I said, well, we were standing in line at the DMV, fun, but she had her phone. I said, hey, just go to any website. So she went to a website, and we scrolled down, and the first ad that we saw, I said, okay, you see that ad right there? She says, yep. And I said, well, there's a good chance that my company helped that advertiser put that ad onto that website. So a DSP is a technology platform that enables digital advertising across a myriad of channels. So it's not just display advertising on your PC and phone. It's also audio advertising. It's video. It's native. It's connected TV these days. So a ton of dollars are transacted in the TV world, not only on the largest screen in the house, but also when you're watching Netflix on Netflix is not ad supported, but Hulu on your phone or computer or tablet.
So it changed a lot from 2007, from getting involved with websites to where it is now. And it's not really slowing down. I mean, there are more and more ways to advertise. So if we've got business professionals, business owners right now that are listening, and they're like, I want to get in on this action. I need to start advertising. I need to, blow out my marketing plan and work on my strategy. What does that look like? What's the first step? Because it's confounding.
Yeah. I was trying to think about this prior. If I was a business owner or just any working professional trying to really understand the digital and technology landscape, I think a few things, right? One is, like any industry, there's just a myriad of industry resources, from newsletters to websites, to just content that you can get delivered into your email on a daily basis, that I think is really the first place to start, right? Because that doesn't cost you anything, just to try to educate yourself a little bit more. Um, the other resources are, there's just so many vendors in the kind of ad tech slash martech space. Um, but you can leverage these vendors in terms of like helping you figure out what it is you're trying to accomplish and what's the best way to do that. There's a lot of companies that offer managed services, so they can kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting if you don't have the bandwidth yourself to do it, or feel like you're equipped to do that. There are consultants in the space that can help folks navigate through. And then I think if anybody really wants to get serious, they should be talking to advertising agencies that can do everything from A to Z when it comes to figuring out what the right marketing plan and mix should be. I think for me, the beauty of digital advertising is that it's extremely data driven, and it is exceptionally measurable. So when you think about the old adage of half my advertising is working, I just don't know which half, right? John Wanamaker said that, gosh, close to what, 80 years ago. You really can do a ton from a test and learn perspective in the digital space. You have a hypothesis. You don't have to spend huge budgets to confirm the hypothesis to see if it's correct, and then you can kind of expand from there. So I think that's one of the key and probably foremost benefits of really working in digital from an advertising perspective, is that you can do a lot from a measurement perspective.
And I think that's fairly new to business owners and business professionals, because to your point, with traditional advertising, it kind of was more of a unknown, and you would do TV, radio, and hope it landed on eyes and ears. And now it is measurable. And what does that really mean for somebody who has spent money in advertising and marketing and felt like they haven't had the return? What does it mean to be able to measure that return to the degree that you can?
Yeah. You can track every last action. So I'll just use our platform as an example, but we have what we call path to conversion reporting. So no matter what channel, connected TV, audio, display ads, we can see when an individual was exposed to an ad, and then we can look at that all the way up to whatever conversion event or whatever KPI that the marketer is tracking, right? That might be a lead form filled out, that might be selling a product on a website, and you can tie all that back to the ads that were served and seen. So really, really interesting things, from like the putting somebody at the top of the funnel, then getting them into the consideration phase, and then to the bottom of the sales funnel where you're showing purchase intent or something like that. But it doesn't just stop there. When I think about measurement, it's also we have integrations with companies that can measure footfall traffic in stores. So people that have seen your ad and then visited your store, as well as integrations with companies that can track offline purchase. So closing the loop with it's a company called IRI, where we can see like someone was exposed to an ad and then they went into a store and made a purchase. So tons of ways to measure if your advertising is successful and effective.
So what if somebody was just looking at getting into the digital tech space? What would you suggest for somebody who is stepping into that sales world or the digital tech space? Where would they start? So somebody looking for a career.
Oh yeah, sure. I think that like anything, it's starting to talk to people. I think LinkedIn is just a tremendous resource. So it's identifying the companies that are in the particular part of the ad tech space that interests you, because you have companies like mine, which is a technology platform. You have and I called it DSP, demand side platform. So we represent the buyers of media. there's all types of companies that are on the supply side. They're called SSPs. So there's those folks. There's all the ad tech vendors in terms of like the intermediaries that do ad fraud protection, that measure ad effectiveness, viewability. So there's so many different components to this huge umbrella that is ad tech. So I think it's just educating yourself as to like where, what part of that world am I most interested in, and identifying the companies, and then start looking around for how do I get introductions? How do I find somebody that can, get my foot in the door over here? Because I do believe it's a lot about who you know in addition to what you know.
Right. And as you started out of college, it was kind of a twisty, turny path. Everything wasn't exactly laid out the way that you thought it was going to be. And you just kept following, whatever opportunity you created for yourself or along the way. So that is kind of what it is all about, is who you, not necessarily who you know, but sort of, but who you reach out to and how you establish those connections.
Totally agree. And it's never too late to take a pivot in my mind. I think it gets sometimes more difficult as you get older in terms of like, hey, you have a family today that you didn't yesterday, and I don't know if I can take a pay cut and that sort of thing. But I do believe that life is too short not to do something day in and day out that you somewhat enjoy, right? Because I don't think any of us are going to look back when we're, in the nursing home and say, I'm so glad I stayed at that job I hated for 30 years.
Yeah, don't do that.
No. Follow your heart, follow your dreams.
So before we wrap it up, is there anything that you feel now that has been really beneficial to you that you wish you would have known in college that really stands out to you? Like, man, if I'd known that, I would have been leaps and bounds ahead of, some of the steps that you had to take.
I think with anything, time comes a little bit of wisdom. And for me, I think that at some point in time, I don't know how many years ago, I just realized that, sometimes you have to do what's right for you. I think all of us are innately driven to do what's right for others. And, you do want to do what's right for your company. But at the end of the day, we're all in this for ourselves. And like I said, if you're in a place that's not bringing you happiness and joy on a regular basis, and you spend 40 plus hours a week, working,
toiling away,
toiling away. You spend more time with your work brethren than your family in many cases. So I think, at the end of the day, you got to do what's right for you. And even when that might seem like it's kind of counter to, somebody else's agenda.
Well, it's good advice. And again, with time, you do become more wise and hopefully make some better choices and better decisions along the way.
Yep. Yeah. What is the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I think like at some point we realize that that's true. And, you got to change things up every once in a while.
Is there anything else you want to leave us with? Any tips, advice, anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
I just think that the marketing world and the advertising world today is as complex as you mentioned, Savannah, as it's ever been. But there are so many really fascinating and really interesting things to do to help grow a business or drive donations if your passion is nonprofits. And just going back to what I said before, use data, use measurement in your marketing and advertising, and really understand how to garner like fantastic results. Because I think we're at a time where, smart marketers can do really meaningful things for their clients.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, knowing your audience, knowing what your goals are and figuring out your budget, you can get that done in the digital space.
100%. Thanks for having me, Savannah.
All right. You have a great day, and thank you.
Thanks a lot.
John, thanks so much for joining me again. Now, you and I chatted previously and we talked about a lot of things, but I've fallen into several conversations over the past week or so in regards to programmatic advertising. And I thought rather than doing a second interview, we could just hop right back on and hit you where this is your zone, not my zone. So why don't you kind of explain it in layman's terms, what it is and how someone can apply this to their advertising plan and strategy?
Yeah, at the end of the day, programmatic advertising is the buying and selling of media in real time. And I think the closest thing I can relate it to is how the stock market works. When you buy a stock, it's transacted without a lot of human interaction over computers in real time. And that's what programmatic advertising is. If you go back before 10 years ago, before programmatic existed, buying and selling of media happened in a manual fashion with insertion orders. And that's how you bought radio, that's how you bought television, that's how you bought digital media. And the promise of programmatic was really the piece of operational efficiency. It was going to take away a lot of work and a lot of effort, and it was going to make everyone's lives easier. And ironically, it took many years for that to come to fruition. It still was a very manual process in the early days. And over time, I think we have realized what the kind of mindset was when programmatic was first a thing, and that is to really allow the buyers of media to do so in a very dynamic and a very efficient manner.
So what does that look like if I were the advertiser, I'm the company, and I've got an agency in the middle? What does that look like? What am I talking about? What does real time mean?
Yeah, real time means that the people that own supply, so publishers, networks, that sort of thing, they put either all or a portion of the supply that they own up into ad exchanges or SSPs, which are supply side platforms, where it can be accessed by the buying side of programmatic, which is DSPs or demand side platforms. And there's two different ways to transact programmatically. One is in a managed service capacity, where you're leaning on a third-party entity, be that a ad tech company or an ad agency, to buy that for you. Or there's many people that actually license a DSP and do it themselves in a self-service capacity. And it can be across any channel you can imagine. So it's not just display ads on your computer. It's app inventory. It's native inventory. It's audio inventory. It's television inventory. It's digital out of home. And I think one of the real benefits of programmatic, well, there's a few. One is you can consolidate all those different channels under one roof, so to speak, under one platform, and you can control for holistic reach and frequency across all those different entities, which is something you could never do when you're transacting media one-to-one, right? You can't tie your television to your radio to your online media if you're doing that on an individual basis, and you can with programmatic. And the other real benefit of programmatic is that it really takes data to the forefront. So when you're thinking about who's my target audience, who's my target demo, what kind of niche audiences do I want to reach, you can have all those inputs working together and finding the exact right person that you want to put your message in front of in real time.
Okay, well, that was pretty much the explanation I wanted to get. I just knew last week when we had talked, I felt like there was a deep well there that I didn't exactly dip into, and I just knew that you would be able to make this a really understandable and concise conversation for somebody who's wondering what this is and how they can apply it in their business plan.
Absolutely.
I hope you've heard something here today with John that you can take away to apply to your business or your professional life. If you'd like to find out more about John Ferraro, you can check out the show notes, and that's where you'll find more information about these podcasts and DMG. And thank you, as always, for checking us out. I appreciate it. You get a chance to tell your friends and subscribe.